Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm.
I always thought I might be bad. Now I'm sure that it's true. 'Cause I think you're so good, and I'm nothing like you. Look at you go, I just adore you. I wish that I knew what makes
Half-Life was developed and released by Valve Software in 1998 and was created using a heavily modified version of the Quake engine called the Gold Source. Both Stephen King's The Mist and the video game Doom served as early inspirations for the game. At the time, Valve felt that video games could be so much more than simplistic shoot-em-up titles and hoped to build a world full of interesting characters with a compelling storyline. The name Half-Life is a scientific term used to determine the time required for any specific property to decrease by half. To simplify, it's a term most commonly used in the context of nuclear physics and nuclear chemistry. So in that regard, it makes sense as it's very evocative of the game's scientific theme. Another reason is that the Half-Life equation uses a Greek symbol called lambda, which has since become a very prominent logo for the game. And it might sound familiar as the Black Mesa research facility in Half-Life has a sector called the Lambda Complex. The game was planned to be released sometime in late 1997, but at the last minute they felt the game wasn't good enough, so Valve actually remade the entire game, and in doing so delayed it by almost a year. In November of 1998, the game was finally released, spawning several expansion packs and sequels, none of which would ever have a 3 in the title. The German version of the first Half-Life has some pretty ridiculous changes and censorship. For example, when you shoot someone or something, there's no blood whatsoever, which is kinda strange given how there's still blood everywhere else. When you kill an ally, they don't die. That's right, people don't die if they are killed. Instead, they chose the much more realistic approach of sitting down while shaking their heads in disappointment at you.
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
But the most odd difference is that all Marines are replaced with robots. A common phrase spoken by the guards in the first Half-Life is,
"Hey, catch me later, I'll buy you a beer. Hey, catch me later, I'll buy you a beer. Hey, catch me later, I'll buy you a beer. Hey, catch me later, I'll buy you a beer."
When you meet Barney Calhoun in Half-Life 2, who happens to be an ex-guard from Black Mesa, one of the first things he says is,
"About that beer I owed you."
Speaking of Barney, even though he's supposed to be the protagonist in the expansion Half-Life Blue Shift, the character model for Gordon Freeman is still used. Funnily enough, there goes the real Gordon Freeman. This is the original character model for Gordon Freeman. However, at the time, he wasn't known by that name. Instead, employees at Valve simply called him Ivan the Space Biker. The actual Gordon Freeman came much later and would go through several versions, including different glasses, different suits, and different hairstyles. Speaking of hairstyles, did you know that Gordon Freeman has a ponytail? Well, at least he did in the first game. This is also why it looked like he had a backslick on the title screen of the game. But in Half-Life 2 and all subsequent art for the game, the ponytail is gone. So if you ever thought the Gonarch from Half-Life looked like a giant spider with a giant testicle, you're exactly right. The idea for the Gonarch supposedly came to be when someone at Valve said, "Why don't we put a giant testicle on a 20-foot tall armored spider?" Given this, the name might actually be a combination of the words gonad and monarch. You see, gonad is another word for the reproductive organs, and monarch would refer to the creature's boss status within the game. In Half-Life 2 Episode 2, Dr. Magnuson makes a remark about something Gordon did back at Black Mesa.
"Oh, and Freeman, if you pull this off, I might just forgive you for that debacle at Black Mesa. You know the one I mean, involving a certain microwave casserole."
He's actually referring to a moment in the first game when the player is able to tamper with a microwave.
My God, what are you doing?
I mean, I gotta give it to the guy though, he has his priorities straight. The world is crumbling down before his eyes, but ain't nobody getting away when fucking with his food. Why While you might still be waiting for a new Half-Life game, Japan got their very own back in 2006. It's called Half-Life 2 Survivor and is an arcade game based on Half-Life 2. The game was met with mostly positive reviews all around, but unfortunately for the rest of the world, it's only available in Japan. While Half-Life 2 Episode 3 has been confirmed to be in development several times over the past decade, Valve, as we all know, refused to reveal any specifics whatsoever. In fact, back in 2006, the episodic trilogy was to be concluded by Christmas 2007, but we all know that never happened. This has been going on for so long that rumors, leaked information and vague statements indicates that Valve has decided to put their episodic efforts on hold and instead focus development on a sequel, Half-Life 3. But of course, no one really knows. What we do know is that between 2006 and 2007, Half-Life 2 Episode 4 was already being developed outside of Valve by Arcane Studios, the developers behind Dishonored. It carried the working title of Return to Ravenholm and would have been a standalone episode taking place before the end of Episode 2, of course in the zombie-infested town of Ravenholm. In the end, Valve felt that the market was oversaturated with zombie-related titles and cancelled the game before any serious development could begin.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
G-Man. Who is he? What does he want? Why is he sometimes helping you and other times hindering you? Many theories exist and very little is known. In fact, we don't even know his name, if he has one. Valve has never given him an official title and G-Man is simply short for Government Man. The reason he was created in the first place was because Valve wanted a character that was neither an ally nor an enemy to the player, leading to his enigmatic behavior.
Wake up and smell the ashes.
The story behind the Half-Life series is never fully explained within the games. You get bits and pieces of the puzzle every now and then, yet many mysteries remain unexplained. So this is the story of Half-Life so far. It begins with the Combine Empire, a powerful intergalactic organization composed of a massive variety of both allied and enslaved species. At some point before the events of Half-Life, the Combine invade the homeworld of the Watergons. This forced them to escape to the border world, Zen. Zen is a sort of subway station that can be used to cross dimensions, but their escape was short-lived as they now became enslaved by Zen's ruler, Nihilanth. Back on Earth, scientists at Black Mesa are experimenting with teleportation technology. This eventually leads up to the Resonance Cascade, or the Black Mesa incident, secretly orchestrated by the mysterious G-Man. This event forms a portal between Black Mesa and Zen. Nihilanth viewed the portal as a liberation from the Combine and decided to invade the Earth using his minions and the enslaved water gods. A certain scientist in an orange suit managed to fight off the alien invaders and eventually end up defeating Nihilanth at the end of Half-Life. G-Man is impressed by this and gives you an ultimatum: work for him or die. G-Man then puts Freeman in some sort of suspended animation to call upon when needed at a later time. Meanwhile, portals between the Earth and Zen is now forming everywhere and alien creatures continue to flood the planet. Ever since the event, the Combine has kept a close eye on Earth and finally decide it's time to make their move. The Combine invasion begins. Earth's population is reduced even further and the Watergons, wanting revenge on the Combine, team up with the remaining rebel forces. In fact, the Watergons now see Gordon Freeman as a sort of messiah after he freed them from Nihilanth. The Combine Empire continue their reign of fear and slowly turns humanity into a slave race. Around 20 years after the events of Half-Life, Freeman is awakened by G-Man and the events of Half-Life 2 begin to unfold. Freeman starts a revolution which leads to the downfall of the Citadel in City 17. As a last resort, the Combine destroys City 17 to create a super portal and call for reinforcements. Eventually, the Resistance destroys the portal and we are now all eagerly waiting for Episode 3, or a third something. Surely Valve will deliver.
I've been fascinated by how pervasive.
Just let me know.
In 1967, a postgraduate student at Cambridge University by the name of Jocelyn Burnell was surveying the sky with a newly constructed radio telescope. After a few weeks, she discovered something odd. The telescope had picked up a radio signal that seemed to be pulsating. The pulses had an interval of exactly 1.33 seconds and were initially thought to be nothing more than man-made interference. However, it soon became clear the signal did in fact emanate from deep space, and the unwavering precision of the pulses was unlike anything seen before. As such, many questioned whether it was a naturally occurring phenomenon or a transmission from another civilization. The radio source was even named LGM-1, an acronym for Little Green Men, and Burnell herself could not help but wonder if she'd actually discovered the first sign of life beyond the Earth. As you might expect, it didn't take long for natural explanations to emerge, and we now know these pulsating signals to be produced by rapidly rotating neutron stars, known as pulsars, that emit beams of radiation akin to the beams of light emitted by a lighthouse. If nothing else, it made for a neat album cover. Ever since, an international effort known as the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence has actively been listening for artificial transmissions, but so far we appear to be the only ones broadcasting into the void. Humanity has been leaking radio signals into space for the better part of a century, so any eavesdropping aliens within about 100 light years could potentially be alerted to our presence. Beyond this invisible radio bubble enveloping some 15,000 stars, the Earth is just another silent speck. Not only that, but as technology improves, this radio leakage is dramatically reduced. Before long, Earth may return to a state of radio silence. If most civilizations improve and eventually outgrow radio technology at a similar pace, the radio signature of any one civilization may only be detectable for a very brief period of time. Furthermore, this radio leakage is extremely faint and only grows more and more diffused as it expands into the galaxy. Some of the most powerful signals to leak into space are military radar emissions and stand a much better chance of detection across interstellar distances than the average television broadcast. The Square Kilometre Array, a vast interferometer to be constructed in South Africa and Australia, could be sensitive enough to detect a faint radio signature of an Earth-like civilization out to a distance of several hundred light-years. To detect more distant signals would require more deliberate attempts at communication. For instance, an advanced civilization may construct powerful beacons specifically to increase their radio luminosity. These beacons would be rather expensive to maintain as they would consume vast amounts of energy for extended periods of time. A less expensive alternative would be a focused beam of radiation as opposed to an omnidirectional broadcast. In 1974, the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico famously beamed an interstellar message towards a globular cluster some 25,000 light-years distant. The message took less than 3 minutes to transmit, so any prospect.
Just let me know.
On the 4th of January 2012, a user on 4chan posted this image to the site's infamous B or random board. The anonymous author, who went by the 4-digit pseudonym 3301, challenged users to uncover a message hidden within the image. Unbeknownst to those who stumbled across it, someone had just set in motion one of the most elaborate scavenger hunts the internet has ever seen. Within minutes of the image being posted, someone discovered that by opening the file using a text editor, an appended string of readable text could be found. The string contained a cipher that, once deciphered, formed a link to yet another image. At first, this appeared to be a dead end, but using an application known as OutGuess, users were able to extract hidden information embedded within the first image. The extracted information led to a subreddit, which in turn contained information about the book. The book, along with a code, could then be used to uncover a phone number that, when called, played this pre-recorded message.
Very good. You have done well. There are 3 prime numbers associated with the original final .jpeg image. 3301 is one of them. You will have to find the other 2. Multiply all 3 of these numbers together and add a .com on the end to find the next step. Good luck. Goodbye.
By the following day, the initial image had been reposted all over the internet. A growing community of armchair detectives sought to unravel this elaborate puzzle, but no one was quite sure what to make of it. What was the puzzle for? Who was behind it? What happens when you reach the end? Some naturally dismissed it as an elaborate joke, while others perceived its complexity as evidence against it being the work of a mere troll. Before long, rumors began to circulate that this could be the work of some secret society or intelligence agency, with the intent of recruiting individuals proficient in cryptography, steganography, and other related fields. Of course, it was nothing but a rumor. The 2 missing numbers mentioned in the recording proved to be the dimensions of the original image. After multiplying the width and height with 3301 and using the product as a web address, users were taken to a website. The website consisted of a countdown as well as an image of a cicada. When the countdown reached 0, the page was updated with a list of coordinates. The coordinates pointed to locations around the globe, 14 locations in 5 different countries. It was now up to participants living near the specified coordinates to rise from their comfortable armchairs and venture outside. Those who believed Cicada to be the work of an organization now felt their beliefs had been justified. In their opinion, only some international collective possessed the means and resources to create a scavenger hunt of this magnitude. This was not the work of your average troll. No, this had to be something else. At each location was a poster with a cicada symbol and a QR code.
On the bike shelter over here. See, I got it right there. Oh. You can see the corners. I was excited. I just kind of ripped it off.
The codes linked to an image. The image contained a riddle. The riddle led to a book, and the book led to a website. But here, the puzzle took an unexpected turn. Only a select group of first arrivals to this website were accepted into the final stage of the puzzle. The site eventually closed down with the message, "We want the best, not the followers." The finalists were also warned not to collaborate with others nor to share the details of this private stage of the puzzle. Well, given that we know this, it's safe to say that not everyone heeded that warning. But those who did presumably advanced through the final stages before reaching the very end of the puzzle. After nearly a month of silence, an image appeared on the subreddit announcing the conclusion of the puzzle, and just like that, the hunt was over. Cicada had supposedly found the highly intelligent individuals they were looking for, and whatever happened to them is a bit of a mystery, but more on that in a moment. The complete lack of an explanation was perceived by many as confirmation that the puzzle had been nothing but a wild goose chase intent on wasting everyone's time. After all, questions raised by the original image remained unanswered. What was the puzzle for? Who was behind it? What happens when you reach the end? However, as it later turned out, this was only the beginning. Whomever was behind this intricate game had the foresight to include an authentication code known as a PGP signature along with every clue. This allowed users to verify that an image or message was actually from Cicada, as opposed to some imposter seeking to derail or hijack the puzzle. Cicada had repeatedly warned of such false paths and insisted that any message lacking a valid PGP signature should promptly be disregarded. That's why this image, posted exactly a year and a day after the first, provoked such a frenzy. After a year of lackluster imitations, this image finally matched the official PGP signature. Cicada was back, and it was time for round 2. The second puzzle was not too dissimilar from the first. The image enclosed a message, the message led to a book, the book produced a link, and gradually the puzzle unfolded. At one point, a recording titled The Instar Emergence was uncovered. Another clue led to a cryptic Twitter account, which then led to an image. The image proved vital to the progression of the puzzle, but the inclusion of this runic alphabet would remain a mystery for quite some time. Much like the first puzzle, the second swelled into the physical world when a list of coordinates compelled participants to once again take to the streets in search of enigmatic posters. This time it was 8 locations in 4 different countries. But eventually the trail went cold once again. Another select group of first arrivals had been accepted into a final, private stage of the puzzle. Unlike the first puzzle, the second did not conclude with an official message from Cicada. The trail merely went cold, and Cicada vanished once more, leaving us no closer to an explanation. However, this was still not the end. At the beginning of 2014, it was time for round 3. Once again, the image enclosed a message, the message led to a book, the book produced a link, and suffice it to say, it was more of the same. Except this time, the puzzle seemed to revolve around a strange book. The book was titled Liber Primus, meaning first book in Latin, and was evidently written by Cicada. The runic alphabet uncovered in 2013 finally made sense, as the book was primarily written in runes. Even so, the meaning of the translated pages were cryptic at best. The book consisted of various philosophical and ideological ideas and appeared to be their manifesto. Many have since compared the strange writings to that of a cult. Nevertheless, the book also comprised a myriad of clues and codes. For example, this page advised participants to seek out a website on the deep web, but the site remains undiscovered. Another page led to a website containing yet another recording titled Interconnectedness. However, a significant portion of the book has yet to be translated. The runic text on some of the pages appear to be obfuscated by layers of encryption that has yet to be decrypted. Of the 74 pages featuring runes, only 19 have been successfully translated. As 2015 came and went without the launch of a new puzzle, many came to suspect the Liber Primus had to be completed if Cicada was to return. This was more or less confirmed at the beginning of 2016, when Cicada encouraged a re-examination of the book. More than 4 years have now gone by, with minimal progress and near complete silence from Cicada. Questions raised by the original image have gone ignored. What is the purpose of these puzzles? Who's behind them? What happens when you reach the end? When the initial image appeared on 4chan back in 2012, many assumed Cicada 3301 to be an alternate reality game designed by a corporation to promote a new service or product. For example, Microsoft developed an elaborate ARG back in 2001 to promote the film Artificial Intelligence, and a similar viral marketing campaign was used to promote the release of Halo 2. But the release of subsequent puzzles and the complete lack of commercialization has more or less eliminated that possibility. If we choose to believe some of the leaked information from the private end stage of each puzzle, then we do gain some insight into who this group might be. For example, at the end of the first puzzle, finalists supposedly received this email. In it, Cicada described themselves as an international group who believe that privacy is an inalienable right. The aim of each puzzle is to recruit like-minded individuals in an effort to develop privacy-conscious solutions. The email then concludes with 3 questions. The PGP signature, which would have confirmed the authenticity of the email, was conveniently removed by the leaker. If a version with a valid signature does exist online, I wasn't able to find it. But regardless of its legitimacy, I find this question a bit odd. It reads, "Do you believe that information should be free?" Assuming the expected answer is yes, then the very first sentence, "Do not share this information," seems a bit hypocritical. While the idea of a secret society recruiting individuals by means of elaborate cryptographic puzzles may seem a bit absurd or even conspiratorial, it's not entirely unfounded. Corporations and governments alike have employed similar recruitment techniques since at least the Second World War. In 2013, the British intelligence agency GCHQ launched a recruitment program known as Can You Find It? Participants had to decrypt a number of cryptograms hidden across the internet, and those who managed to solve the entire puzzle were offered a prize or a position at the agency. Google did something similar with enigmatic billboards back in 2004, and the US Navy launched a near-identical project in 2014. Okay, but then what about the recruits? Why have we not heard from these chosen few? Well, we have. It's just that separating a legitimate finalist from an imposter is virtually impossible. In a 2015 interview with Rolling Stone, 2 alleged winners of the first puzzle chronicled the events beyond the final stage. After receiving an email from Cicada, they were taken to a forum on the dark web. Here they could communicate with 20-some-odd recruits as well as a handful of established members of Cicada. They were told that Cicada 3301 had been founded by a group of friends who shared common ideals about security, privacy, and censorship. The goal was to work as a collective to develop software applications in line with that ideology. As friends recruited friends, this secret society quickly expanded into a decentralized international organization. The recruits were then tasked with developing software that fit the ideology of the group, and members of Cicada would oversee their progress. But without the allure of a puzzle to be solved, the recruits quickly lost interest. By the end of 2012, all but one had left, and a few months later, the site was gone. They never heard from Cicada again. One of the 2 winners, named Marcus Wanner, later elaborated further in a video by YouTuber Nox Populi. Furthermore, Nox Populi himself claims to be a winner of the second puzzle, so I reached out to him, and this is some of what he had to say. After completing the final stages of the second puzzle, Nox Populi received an invitation to join Cicada 3301. However, he was not invited to a website but was instead merely told to be patient. Then, around May of 2013, all communication with Cicada abruptly ceased. This was around the same time as when the website dedicated to the winners of the first puzzle was suddenly taken down. Nox Populi later contacted other winners of the second puzzle to compare notes, and their experiences were identical. In his own words, "All the stories were the same. We were invited to join 3301, then something happened, and silence followed a request for patience." Nox Populi supposed that roughly 5 others completed the second puzzle, in contrast to the 20-odd winners of the first. In regards to who or what Cicada is, Nox Populi believes they could be a remnant of the cypherpunk movement of the late 80s and 90s. Essentially a small group of activists advocating widespread use of strong cryptography and privacy-enhancing technologies, but he admits that there is no way to know for certain. If you want a far more comprehensive walkthrough of these puzzles as opposed to my brief overview, Nox Populi has produced a number of videos on his channel which I highly recommend. While these accounts cannot be verified, they do make for a very compelling argument as to what Cicada is. A group of anonymous developers seeking to develop privacy-conscious applications by recruiting talented individuals via cryptographic puzzles. Sure, it is not nearly as exciting as a shadow government seeking world domination or any of the more fantastical theories, but it is certainly more plausible. You have to keep in mind that no part of these puzzles would have required more than one person. The posters are often pointed to as evidence that this must be the work of some international organization, but I beg to differ. I mean, right now, I could use any number of services to hire random persons around the globe to install posters for me. Although, given that no poster was located more than an hour away from an airport leads me to believe that one or multiple persons actually traveled to these locations. I mean, some of the posters were found within walking distance of an international airport. The fact is that anyone with a disposable income and enough time on their hands would be able to create the illusion of a vast, secret network spanning the globe. Not saying that that is the case with Cicada 3301, but it is nonetheless a possibility that cannot be discounted. With all of that being said, I personally think a loose-knit group of privacy-minded hobby cryptographers to be the most plausible explanation. Cicada made their last public statement in April of 2017, merely warning against disinformation, but the current status of the third puzzle and the possibility of a fourth remains clouded in mystery.
You need a logo. Why not make it today? With Taylor Brands, you can create a professional
Wake up. No. We'll guarantee your channel stays monetized. Let's just start from the beginning. November 9th, 2010. A video game called Call of Duty Black Ops came out. What did
and found the Halo games to be superior, while all the COD fags sat in their generic gay video games sucking fat dicks. But the actual reason is that I didn't appreciate or care about history as much as I do now. See, the M rating
In 1999, the Swedish game development company Refraction Games released codename Eagle, a war-based first-person shooter set in an alternate history timeline featuring expansive outdoor environments and a multitude of usable vehicles. The game received mixed reviews but managed to pique the interest of a fellow Swedish game development company known as Digital Illusions Creative Entertainment, acronymed as DICE. Refraction Games was later acquired by DICE in 2000, and using the in-house Refractor engine, the expanded team began development of a successor to codename Eagle. Battlefield 1942 was released in 2002 and was an instant success. It was built upon the same formula and many of the concepts introduced in codename Eagle, but instead featured a more realistic and historically accurate setting. Set in World War II, it featured massive open battlefields, a class system, multiple game modes, and a vast variety of vehicles and weapons. while you did have the ability to play against bots in single player, the focus and main attraction of the game was the unscripted and chaotic nature of the massive online 64-player battles. Battlefield 1942 was no doubt a pivotal moment in online multiplayer history. 2 years later, in 2004, the company released the first of many sequels in the form of Battlefield Vietnam. Battlefield 2 became the third installment in the franchise and was released in 2005 to critical acclaim. This time the war switched from historical reenactments to a fictional modern setting. This new direction proved so successful that most Battlefield games from here on out would focus solely on modern military combat, though a few exceptions slipped through the cracks. Battlefield Bad Company was the first game in the series to feature a fully fledged single-player campaign, as well as destructible environments thanks to the newly developed Frostbite engine. And the upcoming Battlefield 1 will be the 15th installment in the franchise, and the first to take place in the First World War. Given that DICE is a Swedish game developer, there's a ton of Swedish-related Easter eggs and references hidden throughout the franchise. And given the fact that I'm Swedish myself, why not cover a few of them? Claymores in Battlefield 2 as the text "Denna sida mot fienden" printed on the front, which is Swedish for "this side towards the enemy." In Battlefield 3, the rolling text on the MCOM stations is actually a Swedish folk song called Ack Värmeland du sköna, or Värmlandsvisan, and sounds like this.
Ack Värmeland du sköna, du härliga land, du krona bland Svea rikes länder.
At various locations in multiple installments, it's possible to find Easter eggs in the form of tiny sandcastles with a small Swedish flag planted on top. The sandcastles in Battlefield 3 also include a Norwegian flag to celebrate the increase in Norwegian developers on the team. The absence of a Danish flag is also cause for celebration. At various locations in Battlefield 4, you can find pieces of paper from the Swedish tax agency. You can also find beer bottles with the brand label Bakis, which is slang for hungover. The phrase "stor låda med saker i" can be found printed on the side of various wooden crates, which translates to "large box with things in it." After a patch was released for Battlefield 4, a maypole could be found on the community test environment version of Hainan Resort. The maypole is a reference to Midsummer, which is one of the largest holidays celebrated here in Sweden, and will also trigger a common Midsummer carol. As previously mentioned, following the acquisition of Refraction Games in 2000, the team began development of a game that would later be released as Battlefield 1942. However, the Battlefield franchise could have been very different, as a military first-person shooter set in World War II was not the initial concept for the game. Between 2000 and 2001, DICE worked on a title known as Urban Combat, with a focus on, well, urban combat, and was essentially a cops and robbers game. Multiple early prototypes were developed, but nothing was ever revealed to the public. And while the game worked on paper, the team could never get the concept to work in practice, so the game was eventually cancelled in favor of a military shooter. Now, as some of you might have already guessed, this idea and these early prototypes would almost a decade later serve as the inspiration for Battlefield Hardline. Some of the radio chatter and miscellaneous quotes heard during gameplay in Battlefield Bad Company 2 are actually taken from real-life military communications. For example, these lines can be heard while operating a UAV. These samples were extracted from US military footage of a strafing run in Iraq.
You find a bad guy, I'll get you ice cream for dinner. Any movement? I had one guy trying to that's where we're engaged. Alright. I don't see any movement.
In a similar fashion, the teaser trailer for Battlefield 3 includes a voice clip of someone yelling "Holy shit" in panic. This was taken from an actual recording of a US Air Force pilot evading multiple incoming surface-to-air missiles. Soon after Battlefield 4 was released, keen-eyed players noticed multiple hints which alluded to a prehistoric megalodon shark being included as an Easter egg somewhere in the game. It was eventually discovered that if 10 players gathered around a buoy on the map Nancha's Strike, this happens. However, certain hints suggested that a similar Easter egg could also be found on the map Parasol Storm. For example, this hint on the map Lumphini Garden shows an outlined map of Parasol Storm along with the phrase "The monster is real" written in Chinese. Another hint found on the side of a metal crate depicts a rebus that reads "Parasol Storm plus something equals Megalodon." Avid fans continued to search for this elusive Easter egg for several months, but still came up empty-handed. Which is not surprising, as in early 2015 it was revealed by a DICE employee that the Megalodon Easter egg on Parasol Storm had never been activated, as it had never been fully completed and could thus not be triggered in the first place. While DICE had initially intended to complete the Easter egg, it was eventually deemed too resource demanding and too similar to the Easter egg on Nancha's Strike, and thus all related assets were eventually removed from the game. However, thanks to the community test environment version of the game, the incomplete Easter egg was later included in the CTE version of Parasol Storm. To trigger the Easter egg, you had to land on a wind turbine, get struck by lightning, climb a palm tree, and finally shoot a mysterious light in the ocean. If done correctly, a UFO will then appear inspecting the surface with a searchlight before plunging into the ocean. Only then will the Megalodon surface from beneath the depths. In the third mission of the single-player campaign in Battlefield 3, there's a sequence in which you have to stab a rat with your knife.
Hiding will be seen as an act of aggression.
The animal rights organization known as People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, acronymed as PETA, condemned the sequence, writing in a press release that the game treats animals in a sadistic manner. They also claim that this type of violence has a brutalizing effect on the young male target audience. Out of all the things in the Battlefield franchise, this is where they draw the line. I mean, it would be somewhat understandable if the protagonist casually interrupted otherwise perfectly normal missions to stab some rodents every now and then.
In about half an hour, this place is gonna be every fucking man for himself. Come on, let's get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, you know what? I just forgot to do something.
Now stand back, I gotta practice my stabbing. Misfit, this is Misfit.
But no, you actually have to kill the rat, because if you don't, you get shot in the face. Then again, PETA once got mad at Obama for swatting a fly, so their opinions are practically invalid at this point. A select few weapons in Battlefield Hardline and one pistol in Battlefield 4 have a unique reload animation that have about a 1 in 10,000 chance of being activated. This is the reload animation of the Unica 6 in Battlefield 4. And these are all the unique reload animations in Battlefield Hardline.
Suspect neutralized! Get these guys off me! They got me pinned down!
Got a guy over here.
Before the announcement and subsequent release of Battlefield 2142 in 2006, DICE included a few references to the upcoming title in Battlefield 2. For example, a vehicle on the map Midnight Sun features a license plate with the number 2142, and a wristwatch on a billboard displayed the time as 2142. Now, subsequent titles in the franchise have included similar allusions to a possible sequel to the game. For example, on the map Operation Riverside in Battlefield 3, you can find this futuristic drone near the edge of the map, and in both Battlefield 3 and 4, you can find these plastic containers with the number 2143 printed on the side. Then there's the fact that the entire Final Stand DLC for Battlefield 4 is practically a distant prequel to 2142. Now, given that Battlefield 1942 received a sequel in the form of Battlefield 1943, many have assumed that these findings mean that Battlefield 2142 will at some point receive a sequel in the form of Battlefield 2143. However, DICE has neither confirmed nor denied the rumors, and thus we're left to speculate. Even though Germany in Battlefield 1942 is based on the Third Reich, references to fascism, Nazism, or Adolf Hitler is nowhere to be found. For example, iconic Nazi symbolism such as the red and white swastika flag has been replaced by a modified version of a flag used by the German Empire. The cross in the middle of the flag, which can also be seen elsewhere in the game, resembles a symbol known as the Balkenkreuz, which was used by the German military. All of this was done in order to release the game in Germany, as Germanic law is very strict about the use of Nazi symbols. While the Megalodon Easter egg is quite spectacular, it's far from the most complicated. One of the most elaborate Easter eggs in all of Battlefield, and definitely the most intricate Easter egg I've ever seen myself, can be found on the map Dragon Valley. As far as I can tell, most of this was uncovered and pieced together by a popular YouTuber known as Jack Frags, so this is nothing more than a showcase of what other people have already found. Okay, the Easter egg begins with 7 minuscule buttons hidden across the map. One is located underneath a concrete block, a second underwater, a third under a walkway, a fourth behind a furnace, a fifth under a rock, a sixth on the edge of a building, and a seventh is located inside a tree. I don't know how it's inside the tree. Each button controls a random number of 20 lanterns attached to the ceiling of a building in the center of the map. The lanterns can be toggled on or off, so it can be assumed that all 20 lanterns need to be lit in order to progress. But it's actually quite difficult, as more than one button can control the same lantern. So if I press this button, one of the lanterns is turned off. But if I then press this other button, the same lantern is switched on again. But after a few hours of back and forth, it is actually possible to light all 20 lanterns. This will activate a hidden keypad next to the building. Pressing any key on the keypad will cause the lantern above to blink. This is actually Morse code, and once translated it reads, "When night falls over the old factory, a secret lurks in the openness of the north woods. Multiply the letters of the longest word and the one after it to form the code." This cryptic message is a reference to the map Zavad Graveyard Shift, and under a large rock along the northern edge of the map, a strange sound can be heard. After increasing the speed and applying some noise reduction, it sounds like this. This is a sample taken from the animated series Battlefield Friends.
Birdie legs, and birdie legs. I got little birdie legs.
Hey, what are you doing?
So back to the clue. If we take the longest word and the succeeding word from the lyrics, we get little birdie. We obviously can't multiply letters, so if each letter is replaced with its corresponding numerical position in the alphabet and each number is sequentially multiplied, we get 83980800000. Inputting the code into the keypad will trigger yet another Morse code message. This time it reads, "To claim your prize, now join a ranked Conquest Lodge game. Stand at the west side of the shaft of the northwestern water tower for 2 minutes, then use this individual code there. If we head over to the water tower and then wait for 2 minutes, yet another button will appear. Interacting with the button will activate yet another keypad. As we input the final code received in the final Morse code message, the Easter egg has finally been completed. After all that hard work, you unlock a unique camouflage known as Dice LA. What I love the most about this Easter egg is that many of the codes and solutions will be different in every playthrough. So to complete the Easter egg and to acquire the camo for yourself, you must go through the entire process on your own. It's gonna be really interesting to see what lies hidden in Battlefield 1.
Yes. And then I went down to basement of Sidorovich. There's all these mutants. Пиздец, I'm thinking. Is this really the end of the Boris?
Hey!
Or is this...
Hey!
What?
Sell it, man!
Ah, yes. Yes, Boris! Well, it might have taken 1.5 years, but here we are. This is Anatoly. He not speak much. He just moved to rhythm of hard bass. Okay, world is watching, say something.
Давай.
Урод, блять. Okay, давай, let's make food. Okay, since we are in Anatoly's new apartment, we should make something truly slab.
Вот это?
А? Ай, what kind of debil trust food, блять? Okay, extra water on stove, not good idea. Wait, my clean, this is your apartment.
Блять.
Okay, today we're making something truly slab. And if you want slab, then of course you start with potato. And semester components and boom, you have Russian potato salad. Wait, how do you have same bowl as me, блин? Set potato and carrot to boil. In same pot if you want. Also boil some eggs. Блин! Where's water, блин? Insert eggs into water. Insert as much as you want, there is never too many. Since there is no legal limit to how much you can make this salad, we shall make it into the biggest bucket we can find.
Okay.
You did watch this, right? Slice up a couple of logs of Dr. Sausage. Trust me, there is never too much. Small cubes, perfect, very good. Add everything into the pre-washed bowl. Shuffle your meat around just a bit. This amount will easily feed about 2 people. So now we can move on to... What the fuck? This is not knife salad, блин. Try poking your potatoes. If knife going very smooth, then potato is ready. If not, then it will say иди нахуй. This means give it a bit more time. Hey, cousin, why is your furniture sweating? Feel free to use gas mask while inspecting. But for now, everything looking good. When eggs are done, replace hot water with cold. This way, eggshell remove much easier. Drain your potatoes on carrot. Ай, блять, язык штука. Then celebrate that you did not burn the house down. Next step, peel the potato. For this you not only need sharp knife, but also strong Slavic hands. Because you see the pain of peeling a boiling potato is much smaller than the pain of having to waste my time peeling raw ones. You see? Done. Or you can go full caveman style like Anatoly. Last one to finish, buys the beer. No, блять. I should have not taken that bet. Instead of throwing away peels of potato, you throw them on pan, add some oil, and boom, you have the perfect poor slab recipe. For end of month, meat will start whenever you want. No пиздец. Well, no point taking it go to waste. Cousin, you need bigger knives in your house, блять. Hack up the potato into small pieces. Fight the urge to eat the components one by one. So, Russian potato salad, originally known as salad Olivia, has absolutely nothing to do with olives or olive oil, but it is part of the Russian zakuski course, which you can see in my hangover cure video. Also, for anyone wondering why I eat so much mayonnaise, your question will be answered very soon. Next up is slicing the carrot. If you do not like eating carrots that are boiled, go have a long hard look in the mirror and ask yourself how old are you. Mix this cocktail around and bring out the pickle. A true Slav will know that making Russian potato salad is a social activity. Not just because you usually need to make so much salad as to feed your whole neighborhood, but also to show who can drink the more beers in the process. Let a sliced pickle rain from the heavens and slowly watch your masterpiece take shape. Try not to cut off any finger, because gopnik meat is not part of salad. You're getting weak, cousin, you need more cheburek in your life. Once you have finished in the pickle department, it is time to move on with your life. To the oval-shaped chicken produce. You can cut him up into small cubes if you want, but if you have no time to be sophisticated, you just... works just as good. If the result looks like someone put your Christmas dinner in blender,
I came to dig, 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 dig. I'll build a city oh so big, 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 big. Just wait a sec, gotta kill this pig, 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 pig. Cook me some bacon, take a swig, 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 swig. Yeah, yeah, there must be something I can craft to ease the burden of this task. Yeah, I shoot my arrows in the air sometimes, saying "Ayo, creepers killed." Loot his remains and now this sulfur's mine, saying "Ayo, not today, no." And then I'll go to work under the birch tree, and I'll make myself tons of TNT, and I'll use these blocks to build a big city, and I'll mine it all using TNT. I came to blow, 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 blow up everything you've ever known, 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 known. Expel you out of house and home, 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 home.
slightly less terrifying than watching late-night hosts do
At the beginning of 1999, two game developers named Min Lee and Jess Cliff wanted to create a game centered on the conflict between terrorism and counter-terrorism. Eventually, they decided to create a mod for the recently released game Half-Life. On June 19, 1999, the first public beta was released, and the gaming community absolutely loved it. So much so that the two developers didn't even have to make any maps themselves, because right from the beginning, fans would simply submit their own through the official website. Popular fan-created maps like Dust, Siege, Nuke, among others, became essential parts of the game's early development. In other words, Counter-Strike was a major success. Valve, the creators of Half-Life, quickly took an interest in the mod, and by beta version 4 began assisting the developers. By the end of 2000, Valve had actually hired the developers and released Counter-Strike as a standalone game. The franchise quickly grew in popularity to become one of the most popular first-person shooters on the market. Even today, the original Counter-Strike is among the most popular games on Steam, with the most recent installment, Global Offensive, at the very top. It's possible that the Counter-Strike series is a prequel to the Left 4 Dead franchise. You see, a few areas and maps in the Left 4 Dead games can also be found in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. The maps are of course remade, but the resemblance is still quite obvious at times. These overlaps can be found throughout the game, and it makes you wonder if the two series are actually part of the same universe. I mean, if this was any other game developer, we would be calling them lazy, but hey, it's Valve, so... Yay! So the question is this just asset recycling or actual hints towards something more? Much like the arcade version of Half-Life 2, Counter-Strike Neo is the arcade version of Counter-Strike. Released sometime in 2003, the game is only available in Japan and is some form of futuristic shooter with cyborgs and anime-looking characters and yeah, basically a reskinned version of the game made to appeal to a Japanese audience. 3 other spin-off titles has been made as well, titled Counter-Strike Online 1 and 2 and Counter-Strike Nexon Zombies. In 2009, a small Counter-Strike tournament between the two Russian teams Virtus Pro and Force was held in Russia. The event promised a night of competitive gaming between two highly ranked dedicated to the sport. The names of some of the bots in the games are actually named after real people. For example, on hard difficulty, there's a bot named Gabe as a homage to Gabe Newell. There's also a bot named Dave after the creator of maps like Dust, Dust 2 and Cobble. In expert mode, 2 bots can be found named Min and Cliff as a reference to the original developers. On normal, there's a bot named Chris, who's named after the creator of maps like Aztec, Inferno and Frantic. Has a player in a game ever made you so angry that you wanted to actually kill that person in real life? Back in 2010, a man in France decided to play some Counter-Strike. One particular match ended with him being killed in a knife fight. The man got so angry by this that he decided to spend the next 7 months tracking this guy down. When he finally found out who he was and where he lived, he traveled to his house, and when he opened the door, he stabbed him in the chest with a knife. Luckily for the victim, he missed his heart by a few centimeters, so he survived the attack. But seriously, how do you go 7 months without thinking, you know what, maybe I'm overreacting here, maybe I'm just overreacting a bit, maybe I should think this through? No? 7 months still doing this? Okay. On the highly popular map Dust 2, you can find this piece of graffiti that reads Goose. This isn't exactly a secret since the area is often referred to as just Goose. But not everyone knows why, though. Goose is actually a reference to one of the creators of the original mod, Min Lee, whose online nickname is Gooseman. In 2007, a student at a school in Texas was suspended simply because he created a Counter-Strike map based on his school. This happened in the wake of the Virginia Tech shooting where 32 people were killed. Because of the heightened sense of fear caused by this, schools around the country were on high alert for any suspicious activity. So when teachers realized that a student had created a level in a game where the objective is to fight terrorists and planting bombs, things got out of hand pretty quickly. Police got involved and it was seen as some sort of minor act of terrorism, but the boy was never actually arrested. He was, however, kicked out of the school and was forced to transfer to a new one, all because of some poor timing and a harmless map in a video game. All the radio commands and dialogue heard in each installment
Bomb has been defused. Bomb has been planted. Go! Affirmative. Okay, let's go.
Was recorded by co-creator Jess Cliff. It wasn't until Global Offensive that each faction received their own unique voice actors.
I'm blind! I can't see anything! Quit screwing around! I will guard the bomb site. Going to the bomb site. I see them. I can see them. I see our enemy. Nice shot, man!
Thus replacing most of the originals. But not all, though. For example, the final messages like
Terrorists win.
or
Counter-terrorists win.
still remain. In Counter-Strike Source on the map Inferno, there's a room dubbed the Boiler Room, or just Boiler for short. In Global Offensive, they either forgot or chose not to include this room, and players quickly noticed. So in late 2014, Valve updated the game to include this boiler. This created a minor outcry within the community, as players thought it was kinda strange that Valve would update something as trivial as this, while still not fixing many bugs in the game. This escalated even further when the map received yet another update, where they removed the boiler again and instead placed it here, in this pickup truck. This turn of events quickly turned into a sort of running joke or meme, if you will, and the boiler has since been found on other maps as well. Recently, I asked you on Twitter and Facebook if you wanted to see an unspecific episode with just random and hopefully interesting facts, and the results were almost unanimously yes, so here it is. In the year 2000, computers and various machines across the globe ran into the infamous Y2K problem, or the Millennium Bug. It was an issue that resulted from the practice of abbreviating and storing 4-digit numbers as only 2 digits. This made the year 2000 indistinguishable from the year 1900. So when clocks around the world went from 1999 to the year 2000, they got a little confused. The reason I bring this up is that in 2038 something similar will happen. For example, if I bring up my old iPhone 3G and I try to set the date further into the future, let's say 2039, it's grayed out. I can't. The same thing happens with my DSLR camera. I can't go past 2037. So what's going on here? Well, many systems today display and keep track of time using something called Unix time. It's basically a 32-bit number that keeps track of time by simply counting every second since the 1st of January 1970. However, because it's only a 32-bit number, it will eventually reach its maximum value. This will happen on the 19th of January 2038 at exactly 3:14:07. The system will then no longer be able to differentiate between 2038 and 1901. The way to solve this issue is by upgrading to a 64-bit system instead. A 64-bit number will be able to count seconds until the 4th of December in the year 292,277,026,596. If our current understanding of the universe is correct, the universe will most likely have ceased to exist by then. I love how instead of actually solving the problem, we just found a way to delay it long enough so we don't actually have to solve it. Video games these days are getting larger and larger and larger and larger. Not just the in-game world size, but the actual amount of space it takes up on your hard drive. The PC version of GTA 5, for example, is currently at a staggering 60 gigabytes. The physical copy comes on 7 discs, which makes this game all the more fascinating. The game is called .K Krieger. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce that, but it's only 96 kilobytes. The game achieved this incredibly small size by extensive use of something called procedural generation and a unique method of box modeling. In a very basic terms, the game is essentially created from scratch upon launch, which results in some pretty extensive loading times. But despite its tiny size, the graphics are somehow pretty decent actually. North Korea have their very own operating system called Red Star OS. It's a Linux-based system and version 2.0 looked like this, a weird clone of Windows XP. For version 3.0 they decided to go for a Mac OS X clone instead. Now the question is, who is gonna use it? Seriously, this is North Korea at night. It's really kinda sad. They also have their very own web browser called Nainara, and it's a clone of an old version of Firefox. But I doubt any sane person in the country that actually have access to a computer would dare to even use it. You see, it doesn't actually connect to the internet. Instead, it connects to the country's intranet, called Kwangmyong, with its own mail service, social network, news outlet, among other things. Basically, you won't have access to the internet, but rather the best net. 12 plus 1 equals 11 plus 2. 12 plus 1 is an anagram of 11 plus 2. And of course both 12 plus 1 and 11 plus 2 equals 13. Just like the two phrases 12 plus 1 and 11 plus 2 have 13 characters each. Fucking Austria. No, it's not me having anything against Austria. There's actually a small village called fucking in Austria. Even though the village is tiny with a population of only 100, it's become quite famous for its fucking name. In fact, the only 2 crimes reported is people stealing the fucking road signs and actually fucking in front of the fucking signs. One version of the sign features the phrase bitte nicht so schnell, which means please which means please not so fast. In 1898, the novel The Wreck of Titan was released. The story features the biggest ship ever built named Titan, which happens to sink after hitting an iceberg. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? But the novel was written 14 years before the Titanic would sink in 1912, before it was even conceptualized. And the similarities are pretty uncanny. They both sank in April after hitting an iceberg on starboard side in the North Atlantic Ocean. There were not enough lifeboats for all the passengers, they had similar size and top speed, and both had a maximum crew and passenger capacity of 3,000. As a Russian citizen, you can declare your ethnicity as more or less anything you want, real or not. That is what the Constitution of Russia actually states, so people have chosen fictional things such as Jedi and Hobbit as their official ethnicity. Personally, I identify as an attack helicopter. Have you ever looked up at a clear blue sky and then suddenly you start to see small white dots seemingly floating around inside your eyes? It looks a little something like this and usually only appear for a few short seconds. If you haven't, it may sound extremely bizarre, but it's something called the blue field entoptic phenomenon, or simply blue sky sprites. What you're seeing is actually white blood cells inside your eyes. Blue light from the sky is absorbed by red blood cells but not white, and thus they appear as these mysterious bright dots. How do you describe a person with a below average intelligence without sounding disrespectful? Today, intellectual disability is the official term you should use if you want to be politically correct, at least in the US. But not long ago it was completely fine to use terms like retarded or mental retardation. But over time these terms became seen as offensive as they were more often used to specifically offend and insult a person. In a similar fashion, words like idiot, imbecile and moron were actual medical terms used to classify your IQ level. So if you had, say, an IQ of 65, it would be a completely correct medical term to say that you are a moron. In the Bay of Bengal, there's an island called the North Sentinel Island. What's fascinating about this place are the people who live here. They are called the Sentinelese people and are among the last tribes on the planet left almost completely untouched by the outside world. Several attempts has been made to contact the tribe, but the group has violently rejected each and every one of these attempts. The Sentinelese maintain a hunter-gatherer type society, and it's very likely that they have not even learned how to produce or control fire. They are the most isolated group of humans in the world and have existed for more than 60,000 years. A society frozen in time, oblivious to the evolution and progress of mankind. Completely unaware that we can fly, that we have computers, ice cream, smartphones, pigs that look like sheep, Morgan Freeman.
When the moon arose, it is first covered with a magma ocean.
People imagine the lunar magma ocean to be like this magmatic chamber I am describing, but at the surface and covering a whole planet. I see it as this ocean, like the Pacific, but this has to be like completely magmatic, orange, and like probably like fluxing around and probably moving.
Conditions in the lunar magma are as hellish as we can imagine. But a microscopic treasure forms in the magma: crystal zircons. These are the same gemstones used in jewelry. But the zircons in the Apollo moon rocks yield a different treasure.
So those zircon are very important because we know they crystallize in this lunar magma ocean. We know roughly when they crystallize in the lunar magma ocean. So they are one of these old pieces of the moon that we are looking for, one of these old pieces that we can use to date the origin of the moon.
Zircons not only give the age of the moon, they set a specific date for the collision.
The age of the moon is 4.51 billion years old.
4.51 billion years ago, Theia becomes part of Earth and forms the moon. But the story is not over. Space probes measure the moon slipping 3.8 centimeters further away each year. One day, the moon will break free. When that day comes, there will be no more tides, no more romantic moonlit nights. Could planetary orbits be inherently unstable? Could the chaos of planetary migration return? Haute-Provence Observatory, France. It's here that a discovery from a faraway star gives one of the biggest revelations about our own solar system. The story begins when Swiss astronomers Didier Queloz and Michel Mayor